My name is Timur Zaman. Welcome to this webinar. I've got my dear friend Bruce Rogow with me. Bruce has had senior positions at companies like IBM. He ran the first research department, or sorry, you were the head of research at Gartner at one point, Bruce.
Yes.
I guess my first question is, tell me what is exactly IT Odyssey?
Okay. Well, I had retired as the head of research at Gartner way back when, the early 90s. And I spent some time being an angel capitalist, and then I retired and I was home. And my wife basically looked at me one day and said, you got to get out of here. You're driving me nuts. You're crazy. And why don't you go bother somebody else? So I started, this was probably 15 years ago. I started a thing called Odyssey where I just go out and I talk to executives. So I do about 120 face-to-face interviews a year with information technology executives, vendors, consultants, academics, pundits, CEOs, and major users of information technology. I'm not there to sell them anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not there to promote anything. And so the IT Odyssey, which is really my research engine for work I do I have about 4 or 5 private clients, and none of the people I ever visit become a client. I don't want them to even think I'm there for that reason. So that's what Odyssey is. And then about the questions were of a general nature, but about 5 years ago, when I was calling on these people, especially the CEO types, they were saying, we want to be a digital business. And, I wasn't sure what that meant. And so I started following up with, well, what is it? What do you mean? And then as time, I visit most folks, maybe every year or two. And what I started to notice was they weren't making a lot of progress. And they described a whole lot of frustration to me about wanting to be a digital business. And so that led to, as you said, the question I started to ask, which is, okay, if you had it to do all over again, you've been in it for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, what would you have done differently? What would you not have done? What would you have done differently? And that's led to this, almost 150 things that people have said, gee, I would have done this differently the following way. So that's what this Odyssey is about.
Why do you think legacy businesses have a hard time becoming digital businesses?
Well, let me go a little further. It's a good question. I don't think they can be a digital business. I think, like, one of the things I think they have to realize is there's a difference between being a digital business, an Uber, an Amazon, a Facebook, Airbnb, whatever they use as their model,
Right.
eBay, and being a legacy business trying to be something else. And the reason is that digital businesses per se, the models they use, they have about 5 fundamental differences legacy businesses don't have. And let's start with one. They don't have a legacy. They don't have legacy customers, culture, products, invested assets. They don't usually have the same kind of board. Number one. Number two, they don't have legacy employees. They go out and hire digital natives. Third, they build the business around digital. They aren't applying it to existing business.
That's fascinating.
And then probably the biggest one, they're living off of OPM, other people's money. Most of these things, that are out there that are, quote, digital, they don't talk about profitability. You look at Uber, that everyone's, oh, I want to be an Uber. Well, Uber's lost over $15 billion. It's losing, over $500 million a quarter. Now, if you run a legacy company, you went to the board and said, I've got this great opportunity to, to spend $15 billion more than what we have ever taken in, and I can't tell you we'll ever recover it, you're not going to stay there at that company. So one of the concepts we'll talk about at some point is the legacy companies have to start with what they've got. Mm-hmm. And they've got to figure that out. And therefore, they are what I call, they can become a digitally enhanced business, where the technologies help them run their business, make it more effective. But the idea of I'm going to become a digital business, forget about it. They are as likely to become a digital business as I am to be thin. It's not going to happen.
From all the interviews you've done, can you share with my viewers the top five insights on what would executives do differently in the context of digital transformation?
Well, let me break it into two parts.
Sure.
Okay. The first part is they've got to understand what digital enhancement is about. And if they don't get that and they go through the second part, which is things they can do, it's going to be very tough. So let me talk about five things that when I'm interviewing them to find out, I'm not being cynical, but I want to. There's a factor I call the seriosity factor. Are you really serious about wanting to be digital? And if you are, then the executive I'm interviewing is probably going to tell me, these five. He'll give me some version of these five things. They'll say, "Oh, we realize." So number one, we realize there are five types of digital enhancement, and they're dramatically different. You can use digital to make your business more efficient, and you can use an AI or a bot or something else. That's one. Another one is you can informate your products. You can actually sell products that have IT or digital technology in them. Another one is you can use it to extend the markets. Another one that people talk about is where they actually come up with a new business model. Now, if you look at these five different types, they're dramatically different. And what a lot of people say is, "Oh, I want a digital. I'll do a DevOps team. Will be digital." No, you've got to have the difference between, let's say marketing and using digital for marketing versus digital to make your business more efficient. Those are totally different skill sets. So the first thing is they'll talk to me about the specifics of which segment are they going after and how are they going after it.
Right.
The second thing they have to realize, and we just talked with this gentleman, Bruce Taylor, is business now is outside in. We used to deliver IT systems. We would give an IT system to the end user.
Yeah.
Utilitarian. It's locked in. That's it. That's our technology. Yeah. I don't care. I don't give a damn if you like it or not. Directing you, it's a condition of your employment at our company.
Sure.
Okay. I don't care if you don't like the color. All right. Well, the world we live in today, when you look at a phone or a device or something, that world is elective. The end users are saying, I call it "je voudrais," which in French means "I would like." And end users, a lot of the digital technologies, the end user can choose to use or not use. I'm talking about IoT, or it's data analytics, or you give something to the sales force or your research team. They can just say, forget about it. I don't want it. I don't like it. So you're no longer building systems for directive use. You're now having to learn, hey, I have to do this in a way that is selective or utilized by the individual. So they're elective. The third problem they have to talk about is they have wound the cord or the spring so hard in their company. There is no slack, and they're dealing with a skeleton crew. And if you have a skeleton crew coming out of the recession, and they're primarily people who followed orders, and I've wound them so tight, and there's no slack to try experimentation or risk, I don't think these folks, no matter how hard I crack the whip, are going to come up with new things. They're just completely heads down doing what they have to do. The fourth thing is a lot of this stuff that people have, in the cases of CEOs who've actually been fired over digitalization because they did it, not because they didn't do it, but because they did it, is show me the money. Unlike, an Uber or many of these companies that are running on OPM, other people's money, legacy businesses have to show money. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard of, say, a data analytics project where they went to the marketing department or the CEO and they said, we have this terrific thing we learned. And I'm thinking now of a CEO. I was actually in the meeting where the CEO said, I don't give a damn what you've learned. We're not a university. Well, how the hell do we make money? I don't care that you know our best clients are the most profitable. All right, what do we do about it? And so you have this interesting issue of that last mile between, okay, we've learned something from analytics, to how do I convert it to make money? And one of those 5 ways is an example. And then the last thing was brought to me by a CEO in February. We were on the phone, and it turns out he and I had started business the same year, many years ago. And the first day at work, his day at work, they announced that the company had gone digital, or excuse me, had gone global, excuse me, because they opened an office, a sales office in Stuttgart to sell to the automotive companies in Germany. It turned out that office was a complete failure. They restructured. It's now 50 years later. And this gentleman is CEO. He's been CEO for 16 years. And he said, I think your digitalization, the digital enhancement, is going to be like globalization. For us to succeed, and they operate in 120 countries today, he said, we had to change everything. Our headquarters, the way we operate, our systems, our culture, our terms and conditions, our products, our supply chain. I could go on forever. And he said, I think to be able to take advantage of what digital can provide, we're going to have an equally transformational effort that's going to last well beyond my tenure or my successor's tenure as a CEO. So when I'm interviewing people, I'm saying, gee, do they get it? Do they understand it? It's as big a problem. You know, there's no quick solution, as globalization has shown us. Do they understand their multiple versions? All of these things, because if they aren't seeing it as an example, it's about elective versus directive systems. Any of the things that people said, oh, we would have done differently, they're not going to be successful.
Bruce, I'm the CEO of pick a company you want. I just became the CEO. What are the questions I should be asking around digital transformation when I'm not?
Well, I think one of the things you need to do is start with restructuring the board. In answer to your question, let's start at the top. You mentioned the CEO. I don't expect that a CEO today of a major legacy business is going to, I don't expect them to become the IT person or to be able to, let's say, ask all the right questions. The first thing I'd like to see them do, and I know there's a lot of reasons it's difficult to do, is why don't you either get a private person to advise you who is not a vendor, isn't, a pundit, and ideally it would be a chief information officer. And ideally you want to have a CIO on the board. The number one thing that CEOs told me when I asked them, what would you have done differently, is they said, instead of putting a vendor CEO on the board to tell us how wonderful the digital could be, we should have put a CIO on the board who could tell us how to make it happen. Now, what most boards do is they put someone on the board with technology. You can tell them the why, you must automate or the company will go out of business, or they tell them the what, you ought to do AI, you ought to do IoT, you ought to be doing, analytics. But what they don't have is somebody on the board who asks the questions of, okay, how do I do it? Who do I need? When do I do it? Where do I do it? And what's the economics of it? And so I think having that kind of person as a private advisor for the CEO, and also having that kind of person on the board, is a very good first step. And work with them to figure out what you need to do in the context of your own company. You just can't transform overnight.
I love it. Really interesting. If I am, so now I'm the CIO, or sorry, I'm the CEO. I got a CIO. I'm now got a digital transformation blueprint. This is what my business is about. The word that you used was a digitally enhanced business.
Yeah, a DEB. We call them a DEB, a digitally enhanced business. It's how do I, do one of the 5 ways I can enhance the business through digital technology.
are there any questions that I should be asking vendors or my employees? Or I'm going to use all the wrong words here, and I apologize for using the wrong words.
No, no.
What are the questions I should be asking my legacy employees?
Well, let me give you one that.
What are questions I should be asking my vendors? And then what are the questions I think you suggested I should fire my board. So let's just assume that's not option A. That's not an option, okay? Let's just take that off the table. What are some questions I could be asking my board?
Well, I'll give you one that no one gave me this term. I'm going to use a word that, but they all told me to do this. But so it's my word, but they told me. They basically said one of the things the CEO should have demanded is, and some of this is controversial, is they should have eliminated succession planning, outlawed.
That's weird. Why?
What they should have been doing is doing progression planning. And when you do succession planning, whether you say you want to or not, you wind up replacing like with like. So if I have somebody who's this kind of a CFO or that kind of a CIO or this kind of a head of marketing, I'm going to replace them with, or they're going to replace themselves, typically with someone like themselves.
Interesting.
A progression, if you demand progression plans from the enterprise, the first question is exactly what you asked. What the hell is a progression plan? Well, it's how we're going to get with people to where we want to go. So I've got to have an idea of where do I at least want to start this journey. If it's a 50-year journey or 20 years or a year, where do I start it? So I want to know, how do I progress to that? What kinds of skill sets do I need? What kind of capabilities? How do I acquire them? You know, which of the 500 ideas that people have here are probably the 5 best? So progression planning forces that. And now I can say, okay, these are the kinds of people I need. And I replace the old succession planning that I did that gave me like for like with a progression plan. And that was, I mentioned the CIO of the board was one of the 5. Another one of the 5 is this idea of, okay, moving from succession planning to progression planning.
So sorry, I apologize. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. And what I want to do is I want to make sure it's not a fancy marketing term to describe something that's already in existence, because a lot of people create fancy marketing terms. Sorry, I should say this differently. A lot of people create new terms to describe something that was already done before. And I just want to make sure it's a different way of thinking about it. So as a CEO, I used to do succession planning, who's going to take over my job. What you're suggesting is I should be looking at a progression planning. How is progression planning different? How is it I'm helping my people to go from here to here?
Well, usually succession planning, the individual in an executive in a job thinks, okay, what's the right person to replace me with, and which of my employees is best?
Yeah.
Do that, or should we go outside? That's the thinking process.
Yeah.
With a progression planning, I'm starting with where do we want to go fairly specifically. We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
Let's start with that, and let's work backwards into what are we going to need in this job, as opposed to starting with what do I do and who should replace me. And
I got it. I like that. That is a different way of thinking. That is a different question for sure.
Exactly. And it's very painful, because I've been involved with several of them, and the people go, well, we're going to, the future lies ahead. We're going to go to the future. Can you be a little more specific? Well, what exactly are we going to try to do? Which then brings that another one of the issues is, let's focus by segment. Which type of digital enhancement applied where in our business, to what degree, is going to be what we want to progress to? And now I can start to, think, okay, what kind of people do I need? And by the way, it also, where do I have to change process? Another thing, where do I have to change incentives? Where do I have to change capital allocation, measurement? All of those things are a factor. A lot of people say, the reason we can't do digital enhancement better, or digital enablement, or whatever we want to call it, is cultural. Okay, got it. Just saying, admiring the issue that it's culture doesn't do anything. How is it that we begin to change? And there's a technique that used to be used to do organizational change no one uses anymore, that everybody should look into, called Hersey Blanchard, situational leadership. It's how do you get an organization to do things it's never done before. And that's the way it was done, back in my career. And now I ask people about it and they go, huh? Never heard of it. And it's a technique that basically forces you to take incremental steps to change.
I love it. I love it. Bruce, thank you so much for your time, for being so generous with your insights with our members. Okay, don't go. This is behind the scene conversation. I do want to have a behind the scene conversation, which, by the way, I'm recording and I'm going to make this available to people who subscribe or something.
Okay.
So Bruce, in my 8 billion of innovation venture capital business, roughly the number of companies I bump into who contact us. We don't go searching for anybody. They contact us. They find us. Roughly, I talk to about 17 to 19 companies a week. Artificial intelligence, blockchain, primarily the big sectors, and then they go into security and other stuff and all around the world. One of the consistent challenges I bump into is my investment policy is security of capital, security of my rate of return, and security of my exit plan. It's pretty simple. So if you were going to call me and say, hey, I want $5 billion to invest in, you want me to invest $5 million in your company to do X, Y, Z, I have no problem doing that. I can write you the check. I don't even have to go raise the money. My challenge is security of capital. I'll say, so Bruce, how are you securing, what is my capital secured against? And sometimes it's a security against the assets of the organization, fine. But sometimes, a lot of times, companies say, well, security against future revenues, which, well, that's really not security. That's a risk. And I said, so tell me more about your business. And I specifically see this in the software industry for some reason. I find that a lot of businesses have a hard time creating recurring revenue. So let's say if you were a consultant, right? Maybe you'll have a consulting agreement with me, and the agreement is I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars for you to give me advisory services. But that agreement has a start date and a stop date. It's not a recurring agreement. So the valuation of your business is worth that much versus that much because you haven't thought through the recurring revenue business model, if that makes sense. And so for me as an investor, I cannot see security of my capital against that. The question that I'm trying to figure out and how do I help the market, how do I contribute to the market is how do I get businesses to think differently in terms of creating recurring revenues? In the context of digital transformation, because that by itself is a different way of thinking, is there anything here that resonates for you? Any insights or ideas you have? And I love when you smile because I know whenever you smile from all the years that I know you, it's a way of you saying, I have something brilliant to now say.
I don't know if it's brilliant. There are a couple of thoughts.
Yes.
Some of which are, somewhat controversial. And there is a field called digital monetization or agile monetization. Let's talk about the mechanics of it. There's actually a person I can put you in contact with, Andrew Daly, who runs a research firm that focuses on agile monetization. And agile monetization is how do I do the mechanics of recurring revenue? Okay, because the mechanics of it don't necessarily tend to line up with the way in which most people's accounting and billing systems work. And the first time I heard of this, I thought when Andrew told me he was going to go do this in his firm, that they were going to become the research people for this field, I thought that's nuts What are you going to have? Two customers? He gets 500 to 600 people at his conferences where their company's trying to figure out the mechanics of that. All right, so that's one. The second thing is it's something we wrestled with at Gartner, because Gartner is a perfect example. We had to figure out how to be, a continuous service where we get renewals, continuous revenue. And it was a combination of things in terms of the structuring of the business and the service is one. And then the second thing is having a sales force and having the ability to maintain the customer relationship. I mentioned i6. We've been around 20 years. The founder, Rick Swanborg, has forced a model where we get 90-95% renewals. Just because of the way in which the model is structured to keep people continually involved. If you want recurring revenue and you're just doing it around a particular project, okay, when that's over, it's over. You have to resell. If I can do it around a continuous value proposition to that buyer, that potential buyer, their continuing value, it's much easier to continue the revenue. And there's a fellow there you might talk to named Terry Waters, who is a kind of an expert in the field of how do you create businesses. I call it revenue while I sleep. I'll tell you where you see this a lot now is law firms, where the law firm has lived off of billable hours, and now they're trying to come up with apps and services that the customer buys on a continuing basis. So revenue comes in without the billable hours. And there are a number of companies, by the way, who do that and do it on a continuing basis.
Give me 1 second. I employ 3 law firms full-time. I have an in-house legal counsel. My lawyer is just down the hall to me. In-house legal counsel. None of them have come to me with, hey, I'm going to charge you recurring revenues and a recurring revenue model. How does a lawyer charge me recurring revenues?
Well, if you think about it, it's fairly you've got to get into the nuance of the practice. And I'll give you one example. See, the 4 examples that pop up in my mind are all confidential, but I'll make one up.
Thank you. Make one up.
I'm a law firm that represents people who issue warranties.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Got it.
And the whole issue of we're constantly getting sued.
Okay.
And so rather than every time the phone rings and something goes wrong, I assign a junior assistant, intern or law clerk to it to go look at it and then do a little background research and get it up to the partner level, and we adjudicate the case. It turns out there are RPA, robotic process automation tools that can automatically take the incoming, charge from a customer, can deal with it with AI or something, return it, actually do the filings, follow up on the filings and all that. I sell that as an app to my customer who, my client is the firm that issued the warranty.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's a very successful firm, as an example, in Wilmington, Delaware, called CSC. It's not computer science, it's company services company, I think is their name, or corporate services. And they offer all kinds of continuous services related to things like I'm McDonald's and I want to build restaurants and I need to get all the permits taken care of in, Toronto or Mississauga or wherever it may be. They have applications that actually manage all of that for them. It's a continuous service. Will I be opening new restaurants and doing building next year? Yeah, and the year after and the year after. So I buy the service from them.
I love it.
Okay, so there's a bunch of this fellow I mentioned, Terry Waters, is an expert. He's done many of these. He actually was responsible for some of the most successful services at Gartner continuous services. But it's a mentality that does it. The third element is, now I'm on my soapbox. I haven't gotten controversial yet. We have a real problem in our economy. And that economy, it was Andrew Grove right before he died. I think I mentioned this to you once. Andrew Grove, before he died, wrote an article in Bloomberg Business Week where he said, what's wrong with the global economy are entrepreneurs. They're killing us.
Okay, that's odd.
And his reason was they're all in it for their own startup. They feel they're entitled to things. They don't have to have a business. And so I agree with this. I run into a lot of firms where it's all about what is my idea? How can I have fun with it for a few years? How the hell do I get out before they find out there's no there there? What I really had was a product. I might have had a service. I might have, but I didn't have a business. And I don't even know how to do a business, because a business, it's not about revenue or what is my last round. It's about profitability on a continuing basis. And right now, our best and brightest young people are wanting to be serial entrepreneurs. I have a friend who's been CEO of 17 startups or
Wow.
entrepreneurial ventures. Not one of them is still in business. Not one.
Wow.
They all were either sold off to somebody, or there was an exit strategy, or they closed it down. What Andrew Grove was saying in the article is we need to change our culture to where the role model is not the entrepreneur, it's the business builder.
Mm.
So it's not the guy who's living on OPM, other people's money, who feels I don't want to be in a cab, so I'm entitled to Uber. So pay your $15 billion to subsidize my ass riding in a Uber rather than a car. No, I'm looking for the person who's a Jeff Bezos, who's going to build a business that's profitable. And I think we have a cancer in our culture where our best and our brightest aren't building businesses. And in the article, he actually shows data that shows if I give $10 million to an entrepreneur, at best, I'm going to get in 10 years 100 jobs that lasted. If I give $10 million to a business builder, I'm going to get 1,000 jobs. Now, I lived it. The thing I'm most proud of in my career is I was part of Gartner, and it was painful as hell in the beginning. And yeah, there were all these kind of problems because we started off building a business. We were the smallest in the industry. Everybody was bigger. When I joined, we were 13 million bucks in revenue, and people like DataQuest were 4 times our size. IDC, Yankee Group. We struggled, but we were profitable quarter by quarter. And today you look at Gartner, and people can have their issues with Gartner, but Gartner is a $4 billion business. It has a market cap approaching $10 billion. It employs over 10,000 people. But somebody was worried about building a business. And we had people come in who wanted to get in and exit strategies and all that. We were acquired by Bain Capital and others. And they came and they went. But what I'm most proud of, and I was just a small part of it. I was stayed as a fellow for 15 or 20 years with Gartner. But I wake up every morning. I'll give you one last example. I am so proud of an article that was in the New York Times when Gartner went public. That over 120 people who I either hired or worked for me made over $1 million in the IPO.
Good for you.
And that was at $15 a share. Today it's 133.
Oh my God.
Oh, by the way, and it's split. So, I mean, there's a different mentality, that I think we need that says, I'm here to build a business. And you need to find that guy, because the one who's in it to get in and out, and you give them the $5 million, there's no recurring revenue. I interviewed somebody about 4 months ago, one of these entrepreneurs, and he described customers as a burden to me.
Oh boy. Red flag.
they're the problem. The customers are, they keep changing things. They have to keep meeting their requirements. I've got employees who are a pain in the ass. That's not a mentality of somebody who's going to build a business. So to me, it's those three aspects: the mechanics of it, the what's my model, and then we got to really change. I think we have to change the way who are our icons. And that's why I have profound. I look at Elon Musk,
Mm.
and yeah, I can argue, and he lives off of subsidies and everything else, but he's building businesses. One of the most exciting days of my life was the day I went to SpaceX in Hawthorne and got a tour. That
Yeah.
was I'm a big supporter.
You know Peter Diamandis?
No,
Okay.
no, I know the name. I know the name. I don't know him personally.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right. Bruce, always, always, always a profound pleasure for me to talk to you.
Oh,
Thank you so much for being so grateful, gracious with your time on a Friday afternoon. I know you could be doing a million things, whatever, probably asking another 140 questions or 140 other points of views and advices on how people would do digital transformation differently. I just want to thank you so much for spending some time with me.
My pleasure, and good luck with your venture.